want to talk contracts because, Sam, this is always a big storyline at this time of year. The ability to hold out is a huge leverage point, and we've seen some people get paid lately, and we've seen some people notably not get paid lately. I'm not going to spend time on Micah Parsons because cut, paste, this is what the Cowboys do. We know where it's going. He's going to get his bag. The price has gone up since we started talking about the fact that they should pay him. Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, who else? Danielle Hunter has also gotten paid this offseason, all over 35.5 APY average per year. TJ took it all the way up to 41, 108 guaranteed. Give me a number for Micah. Like, where do you think this is going? Higher than that.
He's
so
younger.
He has to come in at the top.
I think there's a weird thing with Jerry Jones, which, you know, honestly, like, if it's his thing, I respect it. I think he likes the hoopla in the offseason, and maybe they have a marketing or brand value to it.
So.
Just everyone talking about the Cowboys in June and July and August. And then I think he just wants to pay the guys. Like, he just wants them to be the highest paid. He wants to be able to say, oh, I have the best, highest paid quarterback, and I have the best, highest paid wide receiver, and the best, highest paid outside linebacker. And so I wonder if there's not just like a weird scheme here, because, you know, if this were the Eagles, Parsons would have been signed. They would have signed him as soon as the CBA would allow him to sign him, basically. And so there's no logic here. He will be a Cowboy. He is not leaving Dallas. There's zero chance he's being traded. When he was in the Cowboys uniform last year, he was a full defense by himself. He deserves the most money in the NFL. He's going to get it.
I agree with you. I think that's where I've landed on this whole Cowboys conversation that we continue to have. I think that there's an earned media component to this, why he continues to do this very bad business, right? Like, they always get more expensive. Anyway, moving on. I said I wasn't going to talk about it because we've talked about it too much. Trey Hendrickson is another guy that we've talked about a lot. Do you think his situation is different?
So I've been hearing that the difference is $6 to $10 million, and that's a lot. And it's very interesting because, like, we can talk about Pro Bowl players and there being some stuff around there, all pro level players, but this was a guy who was legitimately giving Defensive Player of the Year votes last year.
Yeah.
The problem was defense was terrible. This is not a situation where Myles Garrett was the only good guy or the only one of two good guys on a defense and they were in the top 10, or in the case of Micah Parsons as well. When he was there, the defense was immediately incredible. That's not the case with the Bengals. They have to completely rebuild their defense, and they have to do it quick. And Trey Hendrickson is getting older, and we saw that they added Shamar Stewart through the draft. This is a team that prefers to build through the draft for the most part. And while I think they'll get probably a short-term deal done, I do not see this being a long-term solution. I think he will probably remain a Bengal, but this is a tricky one. I don't think there's a good solution for either of them.
Well, first of all, we're going to get to some other names where there's been trade talk, right? Does a trade make sense for Trey? Because to me, just before you even get into any of the numbers or anything like that, but just understanding that we might be at an impasse, I feel like I look at this and I say, you cannot afford to lose Trey Hendrickson, because even though the things that you're saying about the fact that even with him having an outstanding Defensive Player of the Year caliber season, it didn't do anything for the defense. They were still terrible, right? So it didn't move the needle in that sense. But also I look at that and I say, yeah, but you certainly can't take him out of the defense and expect to get better. Like, you're terrible. You have to be better this year. You can't lose by far and away your best player at the most important defensive position in that way. So I kind of think like the trade has to be off the table. I mean, unless they came up with something very, very creative with a young guy. But then there's also Shamar Stewart, who was the guy in the draft that, I mean, me specifically was like, I want him to go to a team that has another strong end, because there's that lack of production that we didn't see that in college. And so you kind of want to let him develop while there's also somebody else that's maybe stronger on the line. And if you take Trey Hendrickson out, then maybe you're not getting what you want to get out of Shamar even.
The Bengals typically don't like to guarantee money outside of the first year. They went ahead and did that for Joe Burrow. They went ahead and did it for Jamar Chase. Obviously, little different situations. In the case of Jamar Chase, technically, a similar level of value in the position. We've seen the wide receivers and the defensive ends kind of one-up each other this offseason. But those are second contracts. And when you're past your second contract, it just gets tricky to evaluate, and it gets tricky to figure out from an agent perspective as well, and to pitch. And I think that's the major hang up right now, is that guaranteed money past this year, because it's clear that the Bengals want to build outside of Trey Hendrickson in, 26, 27, 28.
They are, by the way, the Bengals, the second most expensive offense right now, and the fourth cheapest, for lack of a better word, defense. Which might explain why the offense is baller and the defense is not. Although actually, the Eagles are the cheapest defense. Like, they have the least amount of money allocated to their defense in the entire league, and they're on fire. So, doesn't necessarily always tell the whole story. I mentioned the trade aspect. Let's talk Terry McLaurin. He's a really interesting one. And the fact that, trade talk has started to pop up, and people suggesting that they think that he should ask for a trade. He has not yet held out the first 4 days of camp. Now is a hold in, has reported, but is on PUP with an ankle injury. This is the last year of his contract. He's making $23 per year right now. That makes him the 17th highest paid wide receiver. The Commanders have the 5th most expensive wide receiver room with it as is. Schefter says that he wants considerably more than DK's 33 a year. Is he going to get that? Should he get that?
So this is the funniest one, because this is where the reporting really is eye-popping. Like, there seems to be an impasse between Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals, but I can foresee why Trey Hendrickson would want a lot of money. The stats, the age, the impact just don't align with what Adam Schefter is reporting that Terry McLaurin wants. And it doesn't align historically, and it doesn't even align last year, despite him being an all-pro, which I think is what the agents are probably anchoring really, really hard to, that this player was an all-pro. The problem with that is, you look at players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Brandon Ayuk, who signed last year and were all-pros and were younger. And when you look at the advanced analytics, we're more effective and efficient. And if you go back and listen to our Sticky Stats series, these wide receiver stats actually are quite sticky. They're getting paid below what DK Metcalf is getting paid. And so there's an element from the Commander's side where you just simply may not agree with the DK Metcalf deal. You may have not made that deal, and it's not your job to give out deals that you don't like. And so we can go through all the numbers, but when an agent is asking for a number that you just simply don't fundamentally agree with, can't back up with detailed evidence, and third, have to manage a Deebo Samuel, a Jaden Daniels, you just added a Von Miller, you have all these guys, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, you have all these older veterans that you're already paying, Laramie Tunsil now in the fold. You just kind of have to try to massage it as much as possible, try to get it to the finish line, because it does not seem like that this is going to 36, 37 million, which we're talking about the Jamar Chase range.
God, no. Jamar Chase got 40. Justin Jefferson notably did not make a big deal out of his negotiation and was just kind of like, this is fine for me, I'm not going to push this, and took 35. Could have certainly gotten more. 35 he decided was plenty. I think I agree with the thing that you said about DK maybe just being a bad deal. Looking around at all the wide receivers that are at the top of the pay charts list, DK at this point in his career, based on what he's done and what he hasn't proven that he can do consistently, is not necessarily somebody that I would have gone, who I want to pay $33 million, it's DK. So to have that be the bar feels off, right? Because I think you make a really good point that they could just say, we wouldn't have done that. And so why should we do this other thing that we don't want to do just because somebody else gave somebody a bad deal? It's not like everybody started giving all of their quarterbacks fully guaranteed deals because the Browns did it with Deshaun Watson. Like, we don't have to chase a bad decision. And I kind of think that that's what it is. So he's at 23 right now. I feel like I would feel okay putting him in at 25 to 28, understanding that the last to go always gets more. Maybe I could see getting him to 30 where Brandon Ayuk is. Like, I could understand that argument. I think Brandon Ayuk is a pretty good wide receiver who maybe hasn't proven it from a production standpoint, in the way that like casual fans understand, I think, how good Brandon Ayuk is. So I think that that's a fair debate point maybe there.
Right. And
Which is to say, where do you think this is going from a number standpoint to get it done? What do
so
you think the Commanders should want to do?
I think there's two major pieces of leverage for the agent side, and that is that DK Metcalf was in the same draft class as Terry McLaurin, and also they do have a similar level of output. The problem is DK Metcalf is 2 years younger than than Terry McLaurin as it stands right now, which makes a massive, massive difference at this age.
It does.
The biggest piece of leverage that is late breaking, that is training camp news that we're talking about, is Courtland Sutton's deal. And so, like, let's just get into the numbers with Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton has a higher target share than Terry McLaurin, despite Terry McLaurin's big year last year. More targets per route run than Terry. They have kind of a similar yards per route run last year. Typically, Sutton had a higher yards per route run throughout his career. And, in terms of our football AI grades, the Sumer score is better as a route runner for Courtland Sutton as well. So obviously, Terry's a little bit more after the catch type guy, but they're both wide receiver ones on a rookie team. And Courtland Sutton just got 4 years, 92. So right around what Terry is being currently paid. It's a very similar market. And then you look at guys like Mike Evans, for example, who signed at 30 years old. I think everyone would agree that you probably have Mike Evans at 30 years old than Terry McLaurin, just given the resume that Mike Evans has, year after year after year of helping out young quarterbacks and getting 1,000 yards over and over again. He signed a 2-year, 20.5 APY deal. And so, like, there's just this magnet way below what Terry McLaurin wants of good wide receivers in similar deals at similar ages that is just bringing down that value. And at some point, you just have to pay the market. And I think that's why there's literally, in terms of 2-year cash, a $20 million chasm, because DK Metcalf is making $67 million 2 years cash. That is such a massive difference than what Mike Evans got last year, and what, frankly, I can expect for the Commanders to be comfortable with paying Terry McLaurin.
Mike Evans is 30. Terry McLaurin's 29. Chris Godwin's also 29. And just, by the way, got 22 a year. Right. Obviously coming off of some injuries, and so maybe that drove his price down a little bit. But, I mean, if I was to say, hey, who's better? Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Terry McLaurin, right? Like, I mean, Mike Evans has done more, consistently more. And like, I just know, and this is not an anti-Terry McLaurin. Right. Like, I think Terry McLaurin's awesome, right? And has certainly languished without a quarterback for a number of years, with an inability to really showcase all the things that he can do. Finally got that opportunity last year with Jaden, and now that's a conversation that we're having. I think that he's been a really great team player there with the Commanders. I think that he's handled this relatively well in terms of, what he's saying publicly and how he's handling it. This is just a business situation. I feel like he's not getting lowballed here. Assuming that they're going in the range, they're probably offering in the range that we discussed. Mm-hmm. I think it's fair to not go upwards of 33, personally. He is now, like I said earlier, the 17th highest paid wide receiver on a 3-year-old deal, meaning that, well, I guess 2 years, because he has 1 year left on the deal now, meaning that in that time frame, while under contract, some of the best wide receivers have come up for new deals. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, all that CD, and they've jumped him, and he's still roughly where I think he belongs in terms of pay from an APY standpoint for his talent range. So I just think that this kind of feels like a lot of, I mean, I get it. It's business, and you got to get the most money that you possibly can. Is it the last deal that he's going to try and negotiate in the NFL? And can you afford to take like this is the time that you got to grab it by the neck? But where does this ultimately go? Are you going to miss games? The Commanders, it makes no sense to me that talk about trades, personally. A, they have a team that can win it all, I think. B, they'd have to find a trade partner who would be willing to pay Terry upwards of 33. Right. I can't believe there are a ton of teams out there, or maybe even any, that are willing to do that. And then they're also going to need to get a wide receiver back that can keep them in the hunt. So, like, who is that team? Where are we making this work? They also have leverage in that they can trade him next year, and that the trade number looks like it'll be roughly 28, which is roughly what you want to pay him anyway. So I kind of feel like the team has a lot of leverage here, unless Terry is willing to miss parts of the season. And I don't know if that makes sense for him at this point of his career.
It's such a tough one. And you have to imagine that maybe this is posturing for a veteran to get, 2-3 weeks into training camp, and then the agent goes ahead and comes down. But that's just like not been the narrative for the better part of the offseason, going back to March for the most part. And so if the agent player sides stay pretty still, this is like a bigger deal space than I've seen in years. Like we were talking about Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk requested a trade last year, and we were talking like a $2 or $3 million deal space, or a $6 to $7 million deal space if we're looking at multiple years. That's not the case here. This is like a massive, massive gap, massive percentages of the cap that can mean real movement next year or the next year for the Commanders, especially given they have such an old team. This is like as big of an impasse if everything is reported correctly, as I've seen. I think if we were to discuss trades, I think the Patriots could be a place where it could make kind of sense, given that they'll have the draft assets. It makes sense to get a lot of good wide receivers around Drake May. They already have Stephon Diggs, obviously, and want to continue building. It is a little risky to have that age and that level of outlay of cash and cap for that matter, to old wide receivers, but it would make sense for them. Does that make the Commanders better this year? I don't think it does. So
no, I mean,
it's really tough.
The Commanders are weirdly, quickly, a team that shouldn't be interested in draft capital.
Right.
They should be interested in now. Like they're not rebuilding. This is a team that literally has the pieces, as they showed last year, that if they can keep it all on track, that they can actually make a playoff run. So you can't just go, we'll get someone next year. Like, you need it now. The other guys that they have Debo, who, I mean, again, we'll talk to our guys about what to make of this. Apparently looks good in camp, right? Like, so make of that what you will. They've got Noah Brown, they've got Michael Gallup, they've got Luke McCaffrey, they've the rookie Jalen Lane. Are any of these guys, Terry? Are any of these guys like giving that target earner that we talked about earlier to Jaden Daniels? I don't know. And are the Patriots, do they have one to give back?
Not really. But then that's the problem there in itself, is that while Terry was, he was the target earner on the team, he was not a top 10 target earner or a top 20 target earner for that matter. So it's just like, it's so interesting how the perception of a championship team with a solidified wide receiver one who has been there for years, that finally got a good quarterback, and the reality of the statistics of that, maybe he was a little bit more of a game plan guy than we think. Maybe the Commanders want to continue their kind of weird personnels that they like to run with multiple tailbacks, including Deebo Samuel and a lot of tight ends. Maybe the offense is changing in a little way that they can think they can slot in a second-year Luke McCaffrey into some of those wide receiver screens that Terry McLaurin and others really succeeded on. So it's like you can kind of see the outlines, but this is just a scenario where someone has to break, I think. I don't think there's a compromise here. I think one of these teams is going to have to break.
You mentioned the tailbacks there and the fact that they use multiple tailbacks there. I know you, me, and Tage that have all been drafting a lot of their rookie tailback in late fantasy rounds. Do they have a surplus at that position? Like, is there a way we could maybe do this in a different... Well, I mean, that didn't... Never mind, because then if you trade somebody else away, all you're doing is creating cap space. And I think what you and I have talked about is just almost like a philosophical, like, no, like we're not going to $35 million because you want it. Like, even if we have the money, that's not a good building strategy. But, okay. But you do like the rookie running back there.
Yeah.
Is what I was getting at.
Tack on to our rookie running backs that we like. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt allegedly getting first team reps. This is one of the most fascinating tailbacks in the draft period. A guy who had a weird registration error with the NCAA, transferred up from Alabama State to Arizona, was expected to be the carry share earner at Arizona on a team with Tedero McMillan. That was getting a lot of folks watching it. And then all of a sudden can't play. Lit up the Shrine Bowl immediately with someone that we really liked when we were out there. And then now he's on a Commanders team who likes to, run out pony package, likes to get running backs involved in the passing game as well. And so I think there's a big opportunity for him. And fantasy, like you said, Lindsay, I think between the Sumer folks, we may have the most shares of Ja'Cory Krosky merit of anybody in fantasy right now.
We've planted our flag. Speaking of running backs, James Cook is obviously another contract situation that we need to discuss or is worthy of being discussed. He did report to camp. He is practicing. There is no holdout. He wants $15 million a year, which would trail Saquon and CMC and would tie him with Derrick Henry for third most per year. This is a guy who split reps with Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. Is not like, I mean, he's the primary back, but he's not like the guy who has the entire backfield, right? 2,600, not 26,000 rushing yards. Tied for the league lead last year in rushing touchdowns. Those are volatile, and that can, obviously change that number. But he's trying to get paid right now. Where do you think that number should come in?
In short, I'll stick with, the analytics. I don't think you extend him. I think you figure this out maybe a year down the line and you're willing to pay a little bit more because technically when you really look at the deals that are out there, it's not that much money as compared to the $40 million that we've been talking about with some of these players. They have used Ray Davis successfully. They have used Ty Johnson successfully. They have Josh Allen. They have a good offensive line. They have two good tackles. I think this is a scenario where you could really manage this however you want. I don't think the Bills have to make a deal at all in this scenario.